of asking Senator Ruth Hassell Thompson to come to the floor.
Good evening. You know, I ran out to use the ladies' room, and when I came back, the Assemblyman was speaking. I really was glad because I needed a moment to compose myself. Let me stick to the formal presentation because I don't have a lot of time and I don't want to ramble, and I could do that very readily. As you know, my name is Ruth Hassell Thompson. I am the senator for the 36th Senatorial District, representing Westchester and the Bronx, but also, sounds like Bronx is in the house. But one of the things I think that all of us, when we take on a task like this, we represent this entire state, because the issues and problems that happen in the 36 are not unique to that district, obviously. I want to thank the Correction Association of New York and John Jay College for sponsoring this film, Crime After Crime. And additionally, I want to thank them for giving me an opportunity to talk about the Domestic Violence Survivors Act. And in particular, I want to thank Sophia, Jack, Tamar, and Jaya for their backbreaking work and advocacy in Albany throughout the nation in support of this bill. I can assure you that the cause of justice is influenced because of the work of these very dedicated men and women. I was awestruck tonight by the work of those two fine attorneys who started out as land use and got truly to the heart of justice. And to dedicate that much time to a total stranger, but in the pursuit of justice, that's really the best part of what law is about. Tonight I heard Jeff Ron say some things about me that he's never said before, and I want to tell you something. When you work in this industry, there are not a lot of people who have credibility, unfortunately. But he has awesome credibility. And I have always admired his work, and when I came to the Senate, one of the things that I looked forward to so much was partnering with him around a lot of the social justice issues that he had been fighting for a very long time. And he has such strength of his convictions. I mean, and yes, he has a sense of humor. It's a little wry, but he has. But I think that sometimes when we sit and watch injustices occur in the name of ambition, it takes some of the humor out of us after a while. But one of the things that he has never lost is his humanity. And he and I partnered with others on the Rockefeller drug law. And you want to talk about somebody who's tenacious. And he has a style I strive for, and that is calm. There's nothing calm about me. I work on it. I do. I conscientiously work on it because I sometimes let the passion get in the way. And of course, once you do that, people just can dismiss you. And of course, when it comes from women, we're hysterical. But as we sat there and looked at the language of that bill, I knew that this was the right bill to partner with him. Because if you don't think words matter and words count, sit in a room with prosecutors who are trying to keep you from moving justice forward and be progressive in the laws and policies that you develop, and see how they nitpick every word, every nuance, because it matters. It matters a great deal. We changed with the reforms of the Rockefeller drug law from a punitive model to a therapeutic model. And we were able to create a total different method of looking at many of the crimes that were considered under Rockefeller. And that's our intent with this bill. And one of the things that we say to some of our detractors is that we're not ever in the business of getting a get-out-of-jail-free card. But rather what we're saying is that we need to allow and empower the courts to be able to look at and have a second look and perhaps a third look to ensure that justice really does get done. When you watch the film tonight, and if you watched how many times the refusals occurred, part of it, in a very dispassionate way, demonstrates how important it is that judges must have a tool to start with. And so that's our job, is to give them the tools with which to say, hey, we can look at it again. And without the law giving them that door, new door to justice, it does not happen. So it makes what we are proposing doubly important. One of the things that is very hard to do when you look at the case of Debbie Piegler and not become, remember, passionate about what happened to her. And certainly, you can't depend upon the humanity in the parole board to look at health as an issue. So we must, again, go back to words, and we must put the words in place. We must put the laws in place. We must structure it in such a manner that there's no question as to whether justice was done or not done. So we have worked to build a path that challenged the addicted offender, and likewise the Domestic Violence Survivors Act is similar to that in that it seeks to suspend the rules of mandatory prison sentences for violent felonies, and it gives criminal court judges the discretion to sentence victims of domestic violence to shorter prison terms, and in some cases, community-based alternative to incarceration programs instead of prison at all. The bill gives the judge the discretion to sentence the defendant to a more lenient sentence, and then there are stipulations where there is pervasive evidence that the defendant was a victim of domestic violence and subjected to substantial physical, sexual, or psychological abuse inflicted by a spouse, intimate partner, or relative. And where the judge finds that the abuse was a significant contributing factor to the crime. And lastly, where the imposition of regular sentencing scheme would be unduly harshed. I think as we watched Deborah Piegler, we could say that this bill would have helped her a great deal. The purpose of this bill is to create another door of justice. The goal of this bill is to give a detached magistrate the opportunity to take a second look at a conviction, and it permits a judge not to determine guilt or innocence, but to determine whether or not New York's heavy-handed sentencing for violent felonies should be applied to cases where there is evidence of domestic violence that has played a significant, substantial, and mitigating role in the underlying case. Like Rockefeller reform, this bill allows a limited pool of prisoners to file petitions for possible resentencing. The movie Crime After Crime illustrates the need desperately for this bill. Deborah Piegler was from just 15 years old when she met Oliver Wilson, 7 years her senior. At first, we saw that Oliver was charming and all the things that men are when they first court you. But when Deborah learned that Oliver had molested their 6-year-old daughter, the anger, the fear, and the violence had gotten out of hand, leading to events where Deborah was charged, as we know, for a crime. And the state of California took her to the mat. The state of New York would have done the same. And that's the thing that we have to understand. It's not just California law. It is the courts. And so therefore, this petition is not about just ensuring that it happens in the Bronx, that it happens in California. We're hoping that this is the step to making it happen across this country. We know how victims of domestic violence are controlled. But what's more important, our studies show that 75% of the women in prison have suffered severe violence by an intimate partner during adulthood. 37% of the women were raped, and you heard some of these from the Assemblyman. But as you may infer, the distinction of violent crimes between domestic partners centers around the complex roles that abusers play with the commission of a crime. Often the lines are blurry as to exactly who was the victim and what is the true nature of criminal intent leading up to the crime. The Domestic Violence Survivors Act creates an opportunity for a survivor to make their case to the court for a more lenient sentence. It does not guarantee a lesser sentence, and to be sure, some applications for discretionary sentencing will be denied. But what the bill will succeed in doing is creating an opportunity where a travesty of justice may be avoided and where persuasive evidence will show that there were mitigating circumstances that justified a departure from the normally more severe sentencing. If you truly believe what we've seen tonight and what we've said tonight, I want you to write to our governor. And I want you also to write to the majority leader of the Senate, Dean Skelos. And I want you to elicit their support on behalf of this legislation. And if you know, like I do, it'll stall in committee forever, tell the governor you want a Survivors Act bill, a governor's bill. Tell the governor to hand it down. He's handed everything else down to us. Tell him to hand this down to us. Because if he believes in it, he can make it happen. And if his approval rating of 73% is anything to go by, he could make it happen if he wants to. Let's give him every reason to want to do it in the state of New York. I thank you.
Let's thank Assemblyman Aubrey and Senator Hassell Thompson again.